Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, welcome again. I'm here as always with Mike and David. Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
All right.
Everybody.
And as usual, we round up and discuss the week's most interesting stories that pertain to SMBS, local, and other things of societal and philosophical import. And today we're going to be talking about IDFA paternalism and Amazon and Yelp and Yelp's outlook. And I'm going to start off, I think, by talking about something that came out this week, which is Apple's expanded guidelines around what developers and publishers can and cannot do around the IDFA opt-in, the tracking opt-in, app tracking transparency. And one of the things that was a little bit surprising is that they're denying publishers the ability to offer financial incentives to get people to opt in. And they also are trying to get people to avoid so-called dark patterns, tricking people to opt in. So that's definitely something I think we all agree that is not a good thing, the dark patterns business. But I think that it was a little bit surprising to see them say, we're not going to allow anybody to offer any deals or discounts or points or financial incentives, because surveys indicate that that's one of the primary things that people would go for in agreeing to opt in. And I think that's sort of Apple overstepping a little bit and not treating people like adults. So I know, David, you were kind of in agreement with that position.
I totally agree. I while I will not divulge information in exchange for currency or other perks, it should be left. It's a decision that should be left up to every individual. And if a company is willing to fork over such a compelling offer that people are willing to give that information up, I don't see how it's Apple's place to step in. And I think the timing of it is interesting given all of the App Store antitrust scrutiny that they're under in the EU in particular at the moment. So it seems like it's a transaction that should be made between the consumer and the business, and that Apple needs to be a neutral third-party player. But we'll see if any lawyers or courts or commissions agree with that.
I would take a contrary position to it. I think that Apple would effectively be creating a new marketplace and commodifying something that's been commodified but never been explicit, that shouldn't ever be commodified. It's like commodifying air or water. And I think that there are some things in our society that should be free from the marketplace. And I think that Apple's stance, perhaps self-interested, always, but also I think a statement that some things shouldn't be commodified is an okay statement to make.
But you're okay with the private corporation arbitrating which items should or should not be commodified? Well, to me, that is the role of government. So,
well, unfortunately, though, in our society, we have abdicated that role from government to business, and there is no moderation of that in any effective way. And so, I don't have a problem with Apple saying, "Look, we just draw the line here," as opposed to
let me clarify.
I think it's their business.
Let me clarify one thing with you, Mike. I think I know what you mean, but just in case people don't understand, when you say they're creating a new marketplace, in a sense, people would be offering monetary placing a value on data, on personal information, and that de facto creates a marketplace. And then there would be some set of standards, benchmarks, or whatever created, and then people would effectively have a sense. Publishers would have the sense, well, for $10, or you can get people to opt in for $10 or $100 or whatever equivalent. That's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. And to me, it's like air. Our privacy should be such a fundamentally protected aspect of our beings that there should never be a discussion about commodifying.
Well,
I feel like my location data, for example, and my browsing history should be my property, and it should be up to me what value I place on that.
Yeah. I don't see property in the same way.
Well, so there is an app, Kili, and a data marketplace. People have tried to create data marketplaces in the past. So this is in theory empowering to the consumer, because the consumer can make money choose to make money or not off of their personal data. And my issue with this is just people need to understand the consequences of their decision. They just need to understand that if they're opting in, this is what it means in exchange for the points or the data.
I don't see it as an equal power relationship, though. And so when you don't have an equal power relationship, you have Facebook on one side, an individual or groups of many, many individuals on the other. I don't think that there is both the awareness of how they use the data or it's not that it's just, I believe that aspects of our society should be outside of financial consideration. Otherwise, everything becomes financially considered.
But
and that includes healthcare. It includes privacy.
Privacy is not a shared asset, though. Privacy is a personal asset.
It's a personal asset that should not be commodified. It shouldn't have value, economic value associated with it. And I can see why Apple wouldn't want to be the company that initiates that, is what I'm saying. That they don't want to be the first company to create that reality. Well, it may happen, but
I think their position is we don't want to allow people to circumvent the intention of this rule. And I share, Mike, your concern that some things should be outside of the sort of financial commoditization. But I'm in agreement with David on this in this particular case that people should be given the choice, provided there's kind of informed consent. That's my criterion. If people understand what they're getting into and they freely choose to do it, then I think that it would be okay in this particular situation. Because there is a kind of bell curve, there's like people who don't care and are going to opt in. Then there are people who are never going to opt in. And then there's the middle, which is maybe 60%. And those people will opt in certain situations. And that's what the survey data seem to indicate. So, but let's move on. This is an interesting topic we could go on about, but let's move on to the second item, which is yours, David, and Yelp. There was an article talking about how Yelp is turning to transactional services in an effort to sort of revive itself. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I thought the article, which you shared, I think in our most recent newsletter from Modern Retail, did an incredible job of encapsulating every problem that Yelp has right now. It certainly, Yelp is, as are many other publishers, at a huge disadvantage due to Google, zero-click search results and Google's adjustment of algorithms and all of those sorts of things. I don't think any of us would disagree that they're at a disadvantage there, but they also haven't really innovated on the product side in quite a long time, if ever, since they came out. And they are now not only just competing with Google, but they're also competing with a whole range of reservation and pickup and delivery platforms that have each grown substantially, and a consumer population that has now defaulted to those platforms due to COVID-19. And so they're sort of getting pressed on a couple of different sides. And meanwhile, they've built up virtually no goodwill with the customers that they hope to recruit to their version of OpenTable or Talk or anything like that. And they actually sold Eat24, which was one of these platforms, to Grubhub a couple of years ago. So they could have theoretically kept a foothold in this space, but chose not to. So I just think it's a really tough time for Yelp, and I thought that this article really did a great job of laying out with some anecdotal data, interviews with actual restaurateurs, exactly the problems that Yelp is facing.
I've documented elsewhere just the tremendous decline in traffic that Yelp has been experiencing since 2017, and not just a decline in traffic, but a dramatic decline in the rate of growth of their review corpus, which has largely flattened out, those are the two things that they need, and they're both heading down and to the right, not up and to the right.
So on that point about the review corpus, there was a study that we covered in the middle of the week that showed that Google now is just overwhelmingly dominant in terms of the volume of reviews that they have. And also it's the top single, putting aside Amazon, which is a product, different animal. Google just far and away dominates all the other platforms in terms of where consumers go to get review information. I think that it's very, very hard for Yelp to find a way out of this.
Yeah, they gave up the restaurant industry. Unfortunately, it would have been one of the niches they could have succeeded in if they had focused on it almost exclusively, but they gave that up. TripAdvisor's, moved in, and Google is now moving in. So the one strength they had, they've lost.
And I would say they also would have needed to take the side of restaurateurs in the way that Talk has
Right.
in order to succeed in that industry. So, which they
Yes.
have never done and seemingly never will do while Jeremy Stoppelman is running the show. So,
Right. Yeah.
Consumers don't seem to really. I mean, we've talked about review fraud off and on periodically throughout this series, but I mean, consumers don't really seem to. Well, first of all, they don't know where the fraud is concentrated, but they don't really seem to see Yelp. Which, I mean, my belief is that Yelp could market itself as a more trustworthy review platform. Our reviews have more integrity, notwithstanding the review filter thing, and there's more direct and spam and fraud out there, but they haven't done anything like that. I mean, do you think that would even be viable for them at this point?
no, and not in the restaurant category where Grubhub and Postmates and Uber Eats all have validated. They know
Right.
if a customer has placed an order and it's been delivered, so they'll have a validated set of reviews themselves.
And where Google gets so much review volume that the percentage of spam in the restaurant industry in their review corpus is very low. It's typically, as the FTC research pointed out, the spam is frequently in low quality businesses. And when you explore Google deeply, it's typically in low quality, high churn businesses like home repairs, home services, locksmiths. So you see a massive amount of fake reviews there, much, much less in restaurants, and everything else is sort of in between. So I don't see it as a way out for Yelp.
Well,
And I think
agree.
also can kneecap them by making their review algorithm better pretty quickly. But if you put curators on it, Google has solved the problem.
And that will be a good segue into our final segment, which is I see, and I know we all agree that one of Yelp's only ways out is likely through an acquisition by Amazon, depending on how far Amazon wants to extend into the local business world. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike for our third discussion
just
point.
a quick comment on that before we go, because I know Mike is going to talk about some slightly different angles on this, but Amazon has had various local products throughout the years. They had the A9 search engine. They had a thing called Block View before Street View, and they had Amazon A9 Yellow Pages, and they have Amazon Home Services. So they have flirted with local services and the local space for a long time and in various ways, but they've never committed to it. So it'll be interesting to see whether they, see this as an opportunity that they want to commit to.
I think part of the issue there is that Google has largely been able to define what the local space is. And I don't think most people feel Amazon, Facebook can play by Google's rules. They're always going to be playing catch up if they play by those rules. And that's a problem. But I think where the fight gets interesting will be in local product delivery, which I see Google leveraging their tremendous lead in local into products. It's the first time where I feel like Google actually has a shot at the product search world. And I think that's a fascinating battle coming up. Right?
Except that they killed Google Express, which was their local delivery service that was working with all these retailers, not small businesses, but big brand retailers in an effort to compete with Amazon. But go ahead.
So Amazon's been in the news a lot lately and been at front of mind for me. Obviously, their quarterly quarter was incredible. One of the interesting factoids in it was just the $7 billion generated from just advertising, which is a fascinating number. It's a huge number. But I have been exploring Amazon's behaviors for a long time, and a number of articles came to my attention over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and motivated me to write this article that I titled Amazon's Ruthless Efficiencies, and how in those where Amazon often cheats some of their low-level workers, where they have tremendously difficult work rules, where they've been expanding their delivery infrastructure to to the last mile, to building warehouses, to buying planes and renting ships, all the way to China. And then now, most recently, we reported on them talking about having drivers assemble furniture in the home. And there was another interesting article in the New York Times about an economist in the 30s who developed modeling with Keynes that indicated that monopolies, by their nature, effectively keep wages down, which is a point of view of monopoly that I had never quite thought about. And when I looked at all of that together, I just thought, this just sums up the contradictions of American society a great deal. We need efficient delivery. We need companies that have solved the distribution problems. Unfortunately, we live in a society that allows them to do so unchecked in terms of labor relations, unchecked in terms of credible profits and low taxation, regulations. They're able to avoid insurance, road insurance, so they're able to avoid some of the social costs of what they do. But we as a society need it, and yet it's an unsustainable position. So if you go and read my article, you'll have the pleasure of seeing the first cartoon I've ever created with the help of Fiverr. No irony there, although it was many times $5 to get it done. But I thought it was I had fun creating the cartoon that captured this sort of contradiction in one frame in New York style. So hopefully you'll get some enjoyment, in quotes, those are air quotes, from the cartoon.
I did get a kick out of it, but I don't think it was your first cartoon. Didn't you commission a series for GMB, or at the time maybe even a local business center? It was that long ago.
True. This is my first one in the New Yorker style.
I see. Okay.
Well,
just wanted to get that clarifying point in there.
So, I mean, in one form or another, this question of like the impact of these giant global internet companies on our lives and on competition and on jobs. I mean, these are the central questions that all these antitrust authorities are grappling with around the world. Congress is having all these hearings in one form or another on Section 230, and this one and that one and the other one, and it strikes me that there are really, I mean, we're not going to solve this in the last 2 minutes of this podcast, but these are just very, very, very difficult problems to solve, and there are no easy solutions. And I don't know what. Americans seem to be addicted to low-cost products that they can, buy, that are manufactured often in China or elsewhere, Southeast Asia, that have a negative environmental impact, and so on and so forth. And there's some really intractable set of cultural knots here that are very difficult to untie, let alone the regulatory stuff. And I don't know what to say about it.
There's a certain dialectic, though, between, what happens is these companies, capitalism is very powerful at externalizing costs. The environmental costs of shipping products from China, the human cost of having such low cost production, all of those things, capitalism is very good at externalizing them. If I know you're a reformer of capitalism, if for it to be reformed, it has to internalize those costs so that they get built into
that's
the
government.
cost,
that's the role of government, obviously.
Right. Obviously. It's assuming it can be reformed. I am not that sanguine about it, but we'll see. It'll be the challenge of our lifetimes and our children's lifetime.
Yes, indeed. I mean, one of the articles that I think, David, you pointed out in the Washington Post was this sort of catalog of all the acquisitions that the big companies had made over the years. And this is a system that works very, very well for everybody right now. I mean, entrepreneurs start companies with the expectation that, and VCs invest in them with the expectation that they'll be acquired by these big companies. These big companies have enormous amounts of money to pay the 10x, prices that everybody wants. And
hold it, 10x is a dream.
Well, yeah. All right. Yeah, okay. But I mean, that's the fantasy, right? That's the fantasy
yes. Well, it's a fantasy and as I know in the article, for some lucky few, a reality.
But it's very functional. The whole ecosystem right now is very functional for everybody involved in it, except for companies that don't get acquired, that are forced to try and continue competing, which is the position that Yelp is in, for example.
And for our environment and the world and a few other minor sort of sidelights.
Do you have any solutions, David, before we go?
I don't. On that
Yeah.
happy note,
Well,
I think we
all
should
right.
call it a week.
No, I should just mention we're getting a lot more subscribers. We're very excited to see that
For sure.
to see
Thank you,
that
guys.
activity
Yep.
happening. We'd love your feedback. We'd love your feedback on this podcast, on the articles we're doing, on the newsletter. We're just trying to make this interesting and a place for discussion and to keep people apprised of what we think are the important things happening.
Where we can disagree and agree to disagree.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Everybody have a great rest of your week or upcoming week whenever you're listening to this. And we'll see you next week for episode 14.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.